Eric, we got him. We did it. So for those that may have not seen the movie I recommended, The Insider, starring Al Pacino, directed by Michael Mann, that exposed the smoking industry, the tobacco industry, for its nefarious practices. We basically, I think, we're onto something that is potentially huge. And I'm going to break it
Mm.
down and just, Eric, as always, correct me. You're the science officer here if I misspeak. We found out that research is tainted by massive supplement companies that are using protein powder as an incentive for researchers to include it in their research studies. They're directly funding them, and they have an entire slave labor force that they coin volunteers to carry out said research. So they're directly infecting the information that gets disseminated through the masses. So big protein is responsible for obesity. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think I pretty much,
Mm.
if I was constructing a tinfoil hat of evidence, I think I got him.
Yeah, I mean, that last little connection, some would call it a leap, but I would call it obvious, to where we go from step one, small supplement company with nefarious intents donates massive amounts, thousands of single dollars, to a research project to fund research that, while not specifically on their products, is research.
Yeah.
And it's funded. And when you fund research, as we know, that research is now funded and thereby tainted because funding. And that's why we can no longer trust any research, nor these quote unquote volunteers who are actually getting a post workout shake, which, you know what I would do for a post workout shake, Omar?
I probably shouldn't say publicly, but you could go ahead.
Well, the beauty of it is it's an easier question to answer is what wouldn't I do?
Right. Yeah, I completely.
So I don't think you're off. As the chief science officer, I can do the little, crossy shaped thing, which means what you said is true.
Yeah, so
And it's science.
yeah,
And science is religion.
thank you. Yeah, it absolutely is. We are a cult first and foremost, and see that's what people. Before we go on, we have a great guest, Bill Campbell. He was very brave to enter the cult where we don't take any BS. Okay, we don't pull up with anything. But we're so much more than merely a fitness podcast, and maybe that's probably where our long-standing feud with us. I keep forgetting it because it's so forgettable, but it's stronger by something. Where they claim to be the
Yeah.
first fitness podcast, and I think it's cute that they decide to narrow themselves into just calling themselves a fitness podcast, and that's fine if that's the entirety of their purview. But we're the cult. We are a cult. It's history, science, culture. We're affecting lives here. It's not just a fitness podcast, but this one explores everything.
Yeah. I think we're very fortunate to have Dr. Bill Campbell from University of South Florida, head of the Physique Lab, on the Iron Culture Confessional episode, where we learned all about the ins and outs of research, not only in his lab, but just the nature of how research is conducted. And in all seriousness, some very unique kind of looks behind the curtain, if you will, to where you might get a view of maybe research funding isn't always just one thing, could be seen as multiple different ways, and how he even mentioned how his wife asked him to stop putting forth his own money towards research, just to give you an idea of when you're passionate about something and you get into the field of research and it's an area that doesn't have big funding. I mean, I've spent a lot of my own money on research, like for my PhD, for example, we get about 5K NZD, New Zealand dollars, to fund the research we do internally from the school. Of course, we can apply for external grants and funding, which I was unsuccessful in attaining. And 5,000 NZD, depending on the exchange rates, is right around $3,000 USD. So when I went to stay in Florida in a hotel for 10 weeks and collect data, that, depleted that within the first 3 or 4 weeks with my rental car and my room. And because I needed to travel around to all the different powerlifting gyms locally here in New Zealand, I wanted to get my own linear position transducer, my own GymAware, which is a velocity tracker, and that cost a couple grand as well, and then a huge import fee. Yeah. So I more than quadrupled the amount of funding that was given to me and paid out of my own pocket to do that, and that's not that uncommon for at a certain stage. So yeah, just really cool to hear how passionate Dr. Campbell is and the kind of very in the trenches relevant research he's done, and the story behind, how he went from an era where you couldn't even do a PhD focused on in these areas, let alone would there be was it a time in 2007 would be an entire lab dedicated to physique based research. So it was pretty cool to hear that story and to see how quickly things have changed in the last decade.
No, definitely. And to actually give respect to Dr. Campbell, you see individuals that are in this field because there's not a lot of funding. There's not a lot of it's not sexy like, let's say cancer research or anything that'll be in the news. There's nothing in it other than your passion keeping you there and your story about funding your own research, your PhD. And then Bill, the same idea where he was spoken to by his wife to stop putting his own money into this research because he just wants to know. And I think that's maybe what we're all united under the iron for a multitude of reasons, but one of them, the curiosity of knowing more, which brings listeners here to the cult to try and find out more about themselves and also about lifting. So I think this is a fantastic episode. We have that meta conversation about research in general, where it's going to go, and then also some really good nuggets, some practical takeaways when we talk about flexible dieting, a current research that he's setting up. And so I think it's just a great episode.
Yeah, and if you want to hear the Iron Culture talking funding design, we did it live. It was live.
Oh, yeah.
We live designed a study that will now be hopefully used at the Physique Lab. Dr. Campbell enlisted myself and Omar as study design specialists because we have a podcast, therefore we qualify. And boom, it was done. So the Iron Culture study coming to University of South Florida sometime in the next few years.
Yeah, let's get right into it, man. Let me just say, Dr. Campbell, it is an honor to have you, especially considering the legacy your family has left. What you've chosen to do with your career, I think is very admirable.
Well, thank you. I'm very blessed to be in a country where I can choose what I want and a university that allows me to have the academic freedom to pursue that. So, I'm very blessed.
Was it hard to leave the Campbell Soup dynasty and choose, to get into, obviously, research is a little different. I know leaving a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate to decide to try and help individuals with physique development must have been a tough talk with the family, but passion.
Well, there was a big fallout about the recipe for the chicken noodle soup.
Right.
And there were things said that just couldn't be taken back. So it was easy for me to walk away from the dynasty.
I could see the empiricism in you. You're like, look, there's no evidence to support chicken noodle soup curing disease. And they're like, get out and don't come back. Trust fund baby, no more. I could see that being a real sticking point. So
yeah. And almost as much as just the amount of sodium that I wanted to have in just for taste purposes. I wasn't even really focused on curing disease. It was just more
a culinary. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Yep.
I'm guessing that whole situation left you a little salty.
A little, but I haven't looked back since, and I wish the Campbell Soup line well, and I'm doing my thing, and I guess my parents and siblings are doing theirs.
Well,
I love that you went all in with that. I totally respect level was already very high, but now you've entered a whole nother chapter of respect. So glad to have you on. This is great. I'm excited and happy now. So for those who don't know, and we will have already done an intro. So for those who are listening to this on their, well, anyone who's listening to this, really, you've already heard the intro, but let me just say, it's a huge honor to have Dr. Campbell on. You are head of the Physique Science Lab? What's the official title?
Physique Lab. I mean, technically the Performance and Physique Enhancement Laboratory, but that's way too long, so I try to keep it to the Physique Lab.
Physique Lab, I love it. Yeah, so the Physique Lab at University of South Florida, and you mentioned to me while we were discussing, kind of setting this up, that this is your second child.
Third child, yes, it is.
Third child, excuse me. Yeah.
Yes.
Apparently, you've had a falling out with one of your children, according to me already. So, lots of family drama.
Yeah, they're going back to the dynasty.
Yeah, that's right. Grandpa.
There's more money there.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, for those who don't remember, we had Lauren Conlon on, who did her master's with you. You've done a number of really, I'd say, important studies for anyone who's interested in this area. And I think it would be cool to really hear about how, because man, not too long ago, a lab that was a legit lab at a university called the Physique Lab wouldn't be a thing. Like Physique Lab would probably be the name of a supplement company, rather than an academic university's actual lab, which I think is really, really cool. Sometimes it blows my mind that just in the time that I've gone through my, brief and early academic career thus far, that we've seen such changes and such opportunities for, strength and physique sport. And you're a huge part of that. And I just want to say thank you.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for providing motivation and inspiration for a lot of the work that we do.
Well, you're welcome.
Don't do that. Don't try and out humble Eric. It won't work, Bill. And I'm here to tell you, just don't try.
30 minutes later, after thanking each other for an hour, the podcast ends with no nuggets of information for our guests. All right. So Dr. Campbell, I would love to hear, how did the Physique Lab come to be? When did this become something that was conceptualized in your mind that you wanted to try to create? And what was that path like?
So the conception was in my mind probably as a doctoral student. I was like, I want to study how to make people look better. And I kind of embrace where I am in the food chain. There are people that are exercise physiologists that are trying to help people with cancer, with health problems. That is not me. I am on the vanity side of the profession. And there's really not a lot of people doing what I do. So it's what I like, but I understand it's not that important if I'm trying to get a girl's glutes bigger or trying to pull off another millimeter of a male's abs. This is not life altering by any stretch, but it is my interest. My wife and I try to live a relatively non-competitive but bodybuilding lifestyle. So it is my passion. But the lab started off, first of all, the university where I'm at, it's classified as an R1 institution. And what that means is it's high research activity. And if I were going to succeed here, I needed to publish a lot of papers and bring in some grant money. And there is almost zero money for funding physique applications. So my lab started off much different than what it is now. It started off under a different name and a different direction. It was originally called the Exercise and Performance Nutrition Laboratory. And it was more focused on dietary supplements and sports nutrition. I also like those things, but I realized early on there's more funding in that area. So I, of course, directed my efforts towards where I could get funding so that I could get tenure and stay here, because we absolutely love, my job, the area, everything about it. And my background was more in exercise biochemistry. So my initial lab was half of a biochemistry lab, and the other half was a leg press and bench press. That's how it initially started. And when I say biochemistry, I had an ELISA plate reader, some centrifuges, -20 freezer, pipettes. So I was really interested in just getting blood work and analyzing it for, let's say, testosterone, insulin, arginine levels, nitric oxide. Those were the areas that I was focusing on then. And the more I got into that, the more I'm like, this is fun. I like dietary supplements, but I don't really like the funding part of it, like just trying to get grants. It's just a lot of bureaucracy and administration. I don't think anybody gets into this field managing grants or payrolls and all that stuff. So once I got tenured, and I recently got full professor, which means that there's really no other promotion that I can get, I made the decision I'm going to now switch to do exactly what I want to do. I don't have to worry about funding anymore. Now, I still have to get funding to maintain the operation of my equipment. Another important thing here to state is my lab is 100% volunteer run. I don't have a payroll. Now, if I get a grant, I have paid students in the past. But I look at my role as more of motivational and trying to recruit people to volunteer their time. So that's a huge consideration. It makes me a lot different than a lot of other big, large research programs. So I don't think many people realize that my lab was not what it is now. And it is only in the past few years where I said, I want to study. I basically want to help people who are already in good shape, who want to look better. I kind of call it like the good to great phenomenon. So they look good, they're fit, they want to look great. And I don't necessarily want to do my research on bodybuilders and bikini competitors. We do some of that, mainly in the form of case studies. But my real service, I think, or the real application of what I do is to study bodybuilders, to study physique athletes. Because in my opinion, they know they're on the frontier of fat loss and muscle gain. I like to learn from that population, scale it back a little bit to make it maintainable for people who want to look a certain way without necessarily stepping on stage. So I've developed just like a one-sentence phrase. I like to help people optimize their physiques within a maintainable lifestyle. And that's where I'm at right now.
I love it. And, that's funny. Because I do a very similar thing, but I have a whole lot less operational control over a lab like you do. And it's really cool that you built that from the ground up. That's a very cool and inspiring story. So, I have a number of students out here who I get to work with through AUT who have, similar goals. And one of the things I say in our S&C meetings when we kind of all introduce each other is hopefully I go after someone who has an important research role, like they are doing something like you're dealing with sarcopenia or disease states. And then I can say, well, I do important research. I help jack people get more jacked, So I basically say something very similar. And but to give a little bit of kudos to you, I do think the research you do is just as important as any other sports performance research where, like sports are these things we make up, like whether you're getting on stage and flexing, whether you're deciding you're hitting, an object with another object through a couple of other objects to make these made up points to beat to the group of people who are paid to do the same thing. It's all kind of silly when you think about it, but it's the meaning that we can make from these things. And ideally in the whole bodybuilding lifestyle, if you will, that hopefully you're having concurrent development of you as a person, which we've talked about a lot in Iron Culture. So I think so long as those, physique aspirations are kind of representation of how you live your whole life, then good stuff. So I think what you're doing is important. Obviously, as a competitive bodybuilder, I'm biased, but that's a very cool story. So when did you get your PhD? How long ago was that?
I got my master's from Baylor University and my PhD there, and I graduated in 2007. My PhD was titled Exercise, Nutrition, and Preventive Health.
Love it. And so it was back then, now over a decade ago, where you were like, in an ideal world, this is what I'd like to do. And now you're actually doing that, which is pretty cool to see that a seed that was planted over a decade ago has come to fruition. Yeah.
And I've learned so many things. Like I didn't know how my lab would turn out, and the other thing is when I call it my third child, I didn't have much what they call startup money. So I built my lab on grants from like the dietary supplement industry. Diamatized Nutrition funded me a few times for different studies. Menno Henselmans is funding one of my studies now. So I've been able to leverage, I don't pay myself in these grants. I ask, hey, can you help buy this equipment so that I can keep doing this type of stuff? So yeah, I when I'm dead, I hope to be buried in my lab if they'll let me. And if they don't let me, I'm just going to kind of do it on the weekend.
I love it. I envision a casket with your face on, and then like two biohazard symbols on either side because it's in a lab and it's going to contain biological materials. I think that'd be amazing.
Yeah, and I'm hoping we can somehow hook it up to the squat rack so people could like squat the casket, like it'd be part of a training program.
Oh, that'd be amazing. So what did you squat today?
Bill Campbell. Yeah,
exactly.
I did Campbell for 20 reps. No, we'll get you embalmed, not to worry, Bill, in such a way that it'll not violate any health code violations.
That would be great.
Yeah, you'll be there, just the ominous figure in the background, kind of like Lenin, where they entombed him, and people could just go and visit him, and everyone pays their respect. They'll pay respect to the Campbell dynasty.
Yes, yeah, and maybe we'll offer free soup as they walk by.
If your family can reconcile, one could hope.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about what you could do if you could reconcile that relationship, I could see high protein post workout soup. There's a path forward where the prodigal son returns and we all benefit. Soup drinkers and bodybuilders alike. So
yeah, we can all dream.
Keto soup. There's a lot of different niches you could probably hit up.
Absolutely. So Dr. Campbell, what is some of the research that has come out that people might be interested in out of your lab in the last few years?
So I would say it started with Lauren Conlon's. She coordinated a study for me on what I believe is the first flexible dieting study in resistance trained individuals. And that study, we probably finished that about 3 years ago, and I'm just now submitting that for publication. So I'm a little behind on my publication train, but that's actually not a bad thing because I'm in a better position now to be able to promote that type of research. So it's actually a good thing. So that study basically informed me that a flexible dieting is a valid approach for people, or a meal plan. A flexible dieting approach is no better or no worse than, let's say, more of a rigid dietary approach. And since we've done that study and I have the data, we've now incorporated that type of philosophy into our other studies. So all of our weight loss studies employ a flexible dieting approach. And just to briefly discuss what that looks like, we essentially reduce calories of our subjects on average about 25%. We set protein at about 1.6, sometimes 1.8 grams per kg. And then we say the rest of your calories we're going to split, but we don't really split hairs over that. If you want to eat more carbs, great. You just can't go over. You have to hit your protein and don't go over your total daily caloric limit. The driving philosophy of this, again, is I think a lot of people, again, who aren't bodybuilders per se, this is something that is a little bit more maintainable for most people. So you always have to think, my lab's philosophy is to help people optimize their physiques within a maintainable lifestyle. So that's always a filter with what we do. And since we've done that study, then the next, probably about 18 months later, we did a diet refeed study looking at a weekend increase in calories. And we just probably, I think about 2 weeks ago, finished our last dieting study, which is a diet break study. And this was in resistance trained females. So essentially what we're doing is dieting studies. We're having people who aren't overweight go on diets, who are resistance trained, to optimize their physiques, and employing flexible dieting strategies, diet breaks, diet refeeds, things of that nature.
It's as someone who writes about this both in the peer-reviewed research literature and also on my blog, or gives presentations on it and also applies it in the field. I can't tell you how much I appreciate folks like yourself, Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, Dr. Mike Zerdos, who are taking a lot of the things that we have theorized about in the field and implementing them into a randomized controlled trial, or at least a controlled trial or crossover, whatever, any design, and empirically validating it or not validating it, so we can better update our practices. It's interesting. Some people they'll get annoyed when they see a publication come out that agrees with current practice already. Like, oh, we already knew high protein diets were good, or oh, we already knew that dieting too hard would be this. And I think people, they notice that when it goes that direction, but all the times when it goes counter to it, and we find out, wow, we were being unnecessarily restrictive or unnecessarily harsh, or too much volume, or too high of intensity, or training to failure unnecessarily, or all these other things that have been practiced but then could be better.
Yeah.
They ignore those and they go, oh, we're just validating what athletes are already doing. And it's like, well, I just wrote a blog post about this recently on 3DMJ, and it's called Success Leaves Clues, but what clues do they leave? And my main point was that the only thing we know from observing athletes and high-level performers is that what they're doing is not preventing high-level performance. But whether it's truly necessary or causing their performance, that's another thing. And I think when we can really drill down and figure out, what are the component parts, what does actually lead to improvements, or what it's just something that could be done but doesn't have to be, it gives a lot more options to athletes. And like you said, outside of athletes, it allows people to have choices so they can have, physique improvements within the context of a maintainable, sustainable life. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and I'll even up the ante a little bit. I embrace the fact that I'm validating things that people like your company has been doing for 3 or 4 years. So I'm not pioneering. I'm learning from the industry's best physique coaches, exercise physiologists, and saying, okay, what does this look like in a research study? So knowingly, I'm not pioneering, I'm affirming or as you said, maybe discrediting certain practices. And I'm happy to be there. I think there's a role for that, and I'm happy to fulfill that role.
And it's an important role, because I'd say even when we get it right, those of us, physique coaches in the field, like let's say, for example, like observationally, and I've, most physique coaches have noticed that when you increase calories, whether that's a refeed or a diet break, good things happen. But it's not like we can get bloods in any kind of reliable way on our athletes, figure out why. So for example, the two-day refeed study that you guys did, which was awesome, and it's been presented as an abstract at the ISSN conference, and correct me if I'm wrong on anything I state, I found it really interesting that there was an increase in energy expenditure, and there were better maintenance of muscle mass in the group doing the refeeds, but there didn't seem to be an effect on leptin. So if we were to say, if from the physique coach perspective, if we were pinning all this on, it's all got to be related to leptin, and that's the key thing we're trying to manipulate, we could go down a rabbit hole of practice that might be, at best a time waster, and perhaps at worst just counterproductive if we were to kind of keep, honing in on one specific mechanism that was maybe not the thing doing the magic. Because physiology is, man, there's so many feed forward, feed backward loops, overlapping systems, compensatory mechanisms to get things to work, that a lot of the times we're guessing and taking shots in, I wouldn't say the dark, but with only a little portion of the picture. So I think the work you're doing is really important, especially when you can look at mechanisms, not just outcomes too.
Right. And one correction on that study, which, by the way, I will be submitting that study for publication no later than January 15th, because I actually have a waiver for article processing charge, and if I submit it by then, they're going to waive it. So I'm highly motivated to do that, to make it open access. But the one correction is both groups lost a portion of their resting metabolic rate. It's just that the refeed group, it was not a significant reduction. In the group that didn't have refeeds, it was an 80-calorie significant reduction. So they better maintained metabolic rate and muscle mass.
That's an important distinction, because it tells you that the effects of dieting will come to us all regardless. As Omar would say, entropy and nihilism are always present. It's just how much can you keep back the existential crises and inevitable decline of your physique and body when you start dieting. But it can be a little bit better than bad. So awesome.
Yeah.
So that's exciting that you're going to be submitting that for publication, because right now it's just been the abstract, which I think is great. It's really cool that we can get that information out there, but I would love to see that go through peer review and hopefully see that in the open access literature, which I think is a really important thing to do. Publishing open access when you're in an applied field and you have the capacity to do so is really the best way to disseminate that information. So I think that's really stand up.
Yeah, well, like I said, that's hard to do because of obviously budgetary concerns. But in this case, and again, I don't want to say committed to it because there might be a situation where I can't do that. But I agree, if we can get it at open access, it's better for me as a researcher. More people will read it.
Mm-hmm,
I'll attract more students, and so. But man, it is stressful to come up with those funds. My wife has cut me off. She's like, no more of our money publishing your research. I'm like, all right.
Yeah. That's crazy. I just want to note for everyone out there where this is kind of a peek behind the curtain when it comes to research and how it gets conducted, where we are, and I'm going to use the word, we are so privileged now in 2019, soon to be 2020, to have access to this information where what you publish trickles down to the rest of us, and then it informs the choices. You have individuals such as Eric, 3DMJ, celebrating the 10-year anniversary. So it wasn't just the last 3 to 4 years. They've been on that ship for a decade. But then helps inform maybe what should be studied. You conduct the research, Dr. Campbell, and then once again, it solidifies some of those positions, and then the overall fitness IQ increases. I can't stress how important that is. What's interesting, there's 2 things I want to talk about, and briefly from you essentially indirectly saying this, individuals sometimes where we have access to all this free information, we kind of forget how lucky we are where someone, a particular piece of research would get published. It's like, well, wait a second, here's how I would do it. I would control it like it'd be a medical ward. A study should be a year long, this and that. And here you are basically saying we don't have funding, not complaining about it, but just realistically, there's individuals where it comes to cancer research or a variety of other things. There's a list of priorities. And so physique development is kind of closer to the bottom tier. And as a result of that, you do what you can when you can, and it's passion driven first and foremost. This is something, if you're watching the video, you only need to see Bill Campbell. Like, he's broad, he's wide, okay? He's like Eric's solid, I'm okay. Bill's just, I don't know, you're closer to the camera, but like you're passionate about these things and it shows. One of the questions I wanted to ask, and I was curious just for you to clarify, where I've heard this by, once again, my fellow PhD Google scholars, where they would see a research or something published and they would see it's funded by a supplement company or something else, and then they bring up the idea of the conflict of interest, or like this published this that showed a favorable result. Can you just discuss that briefly, Bill? It's a slight tangent, but just that concept. You need to get funding somehow. You still have the impartiality and you're still conducting yourself in an unbiased way, but how does that work where a big company, so a company with a maybe particular interest, funds a study? How does that work? How do you keep it unbiased?
Yeah, so I think the best thing to do is just to talk about my own experiences. So in the case of Dymatized Nutrition, they've funded 2, maybe 3 of my studies. In all of those studies, they are what I would call researcher's choice. So they're basically just giving me money for me to do my own study. So I'm not testing their product against a placebo or a comparator product. So that's kudos to Dymatize, right? They're just further, and then when I say funding, about $10,000 is the level of funding that I've gotten from them. And they fund other researchers as well. So that's really nice in the sense that, hey, Rob Wildman's the CSO there. I would go to him and say, here's what I'm thinking. Would you want to support this? Knowing that, we're trying to further the field of physique science or exercise science. So that's been great for me. Like there's no dog in the race, so to speak. Now, one thing is they funded the study where I demonstrated or reported that higher protein intakes were superior for aspiring female physique athletes as compared to low protein intakes. So one could say, well, they sell protein, so of course that benefits them. Well, sure, I guess, I hope it does. But it made me appreciate again, in females, higher protein, or at least more than 0.9 grams per kg, is significantly better for lean muscle mass gains. And that goes back to what Eric was saying earlier. Well, no kidding. Like, you needed to do a whole study to do that. And I would say, yeah, that's a question I had. So there's my Dymatized response. The areas where it gets more difficult is when supplement companies fund you when they are comparing against the placebo. So my gut reaction, or my filter response to that, is any research will only ever be as valid as the ethics and reputation of the researcher. It always falls back to that. There's so many things that can be done to be biased, that if your reputation is somewhat into question, it filters everything about how you're going to interpret the data, how you're going to set up the study design, et cetera. Two things that I think are important. One is who owns the data. So at my university, I own the data, or my university owns the data. The supplement company does not. Now, that's not always the case, but this is important for people to know. If the supplement company owns the data and I tell them, hey, your supplement was no better than placebo, if they own that, they would say, oh, good, thank you for doing that study. We're going to burn that because that's not going to help us. If I own the data, or my university, they don't have that right. It's up to me. And I don't have to publish, but I have the right to publish. So that's a huge variable right there. And again, most university-funded studies, the universities own the data. When you start going outside of university studies to more, let's just say, CROs, or I'll just say non-university research labs, I would guess that is rarely the case. So there's another consideration. And then the last thing is just in my case, my students. I hope I'm as transparent as can be, but your students are the ones that are ultimately going to know. They're going to talk behind my back, or whoever's back. They're going to be the ones to say, yeah, we did this study. So if you're going to be unethical, I don't think that can last long, because your students are seeing what's happening. Undergraduates probably don't have as much of an intuitive sense of how research should be done, but my master's students are smarter than I am. So even if I wanted to be nefarious, I don't think I could get away with it. So does that help with did I answer your question?
No, absolutely. I just see, so that's why I made the joke about the Google Scholars. I think when someone potentially has an inherent bias, they'll seek to discredit, either research or a variety of different things. And I've just seen largely in the comment section, for a variety, I'm not going to name names, but a particular piece of research or this or that, where they'll attack the credibility because of the sourcing of the funding. And so it's just a question that I had. It wasn't anything particular, but you having your own laboratory, it came up, and quick side tangent.
So I'll say one thing that I tell my students as we're reviewing studies that have been funded by a supplement company. My response to that is, when you look at a study, first thing you should do is look at who funded the study, if this is a supplement study. If it's funded by a supplement company, that should raise a red flag. But that raising that red flag doesn't mean it should discredit the study in any manner. It just means you should interpret that study knowing that it was funded by X, Y, or Z, just so you're aware.
Yeah. I think it's really important that you brought up how Dymatize has funded you for studies that don't even involve their products. I think people, when they hear funding, or some people, if depending on their political leaning, if they just hear corporation, it conjures certain images, like some really, really high building where a bunch of guys in suits around a table are making decisions that are purely based on the bottom line with no ethics involved. But in all industries, there's companies, which is maybe me registering an LLC, by myself and going into my savings to register it, or me and 3 other people registering an LLC after a couple of years of just doing business and being able to be sued and lose our homes, aka 3D Muscle Journey, and realizing we should have one. And then there's McDonald's, and there's everything in between. And in the supplement industry, there are big companies, but they're really not that big. And there's plenty of companies where, in the end, a single person is making all the decisions for a department. And the people who get together and create a company, they probably have, beliefs, values, mission statements that may not just be, I want to make as much money as possible. And you can almost always guess that's the case in certain industries where it's not an industry where you make a ton of money. So, for example, Legion Athletics is funding a study that I'm doing here at AUT on different rates of weight gain and looking at how to optimize the lean mass to fat mass ratio. And there's no Legion Athletics supplement in the study at all. It's just something they're interested in doing, and part of their company's mission statement is to fund research in the area that their company is trying to help. So I think that's just something people remember. Like, you might see funding there, but if there's no plausible bias or reason for the company to be benefiting from the outcome, it may just be that that's what they want to do, because they're actually a collection of people. And
right.
I think it's cool that happens, and I think that's a better perspective than when you read, like a sensationalist book that says, hey, big sugar or big dairy or big whatever, or when you think about the smoking industry trying to suppress information about the health detriments of nicotine and cigarettes. That's very different than what we're talking about here. And I think it's just, we're very fortunate that we live in a world where there are small companies that are willing just to shelve out some money just to help an area they're interested in, for sure.
Yeah. And I do need to make one other thing. Dymatize, I do use their protein in my study. So I'm, unlike Legion Athletics, you're saying you don't even use the product. We standardize the post-workout protein intake because I believe that protein needs to be relatively high to preserve lean body mass. So I want to watch my subjects at least verify they're getting 25 grams of protein after their workout. So that's, my lab supervises every workout, every rep, every set. So we have the luxury of at least standardizing that part of the nutrition intake.
Yeah. Wow. It's the confessional right now. Every few minutes, we find out a new shocking revelation about how biased your lab is. I can't believe that.
I was going to say, there is quite a difference in the magnitude of effect between a smoking company, cigarette company, causing cancer and suppressing information, and having a supplement company get kids addicted to creatine. There is a difference in terms of the consequences, because I'm already doing it. We had Dr. Darren Kandow, the Walter White of creatine. So we're all friends here.
Yep. We fully support the supplement industrial complex that is we are all slaves to. So it's all good. We're all buddies here.
I advocated putting creatine in the drinking water, and I'm still fighting that.
You know what? You fight that good fight, and when that comes across, if there's a petition to sign, I will sign it, and I will go to the graveyard. I will write down names, and I'll have other people sign it who may or may not be alive. So
okay. That'll help us in our battle.
Yeah, we would have lost our souls if we had them, so we're not really that concerned.
I trade my soul for creatine any day. That's an easy. You know what? Because creatine's expensive. It costs like what? You can
$8,
get almost a half
days.
a year supply for $10. Nah, take my soul, please.
Yeah,
I don't need that. What does it do?
Immaterial. Coach,
literally.
Maybe now that we got into how the lab came to be, your PhD, talking a little bit about ethics, maybe getting into some of the research and some of the exciting findings would be a great next topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we've gone over some of the past hits, but what's on the horizon for the Physique Lab? And I know you can't disclose certain things, but what can you tell us, and what projects are you excited about moving forward?
So I'll say what we have planned for the spring semester, and then I need to pick your guys' brains about an idea for what we're going to do next fall, or at least the plan for next fall. So I have a large volunteer research staff, so I split them into two teams of about 13 people per team, and I had them. I watch it's not like American Idol, but it's like Runway Model. So I basically wanted to have a competition. Who can design the best rapid fat loss study? And I brought in a panel of judges. My judges were Lane Norton, Holly Baxter, Paul Revelia, Sohee Lee, Astrid, the anti-diet dietitian, James Longstrom, former master student. Lauren Conlon was supposed to be a judge, but she likes to work too much, so she couldn't make it. So they judged it. So I told my students, I just gave them a few parameters. And I said, here's the idea. If we think diet breaks work, and you're going to go into a diet period for a week or two, let's be as aggressive as we can for that week or those 2 weeks, and let's try to get an answer to how much fat can we physically take off of the human body while protecting muscle mass and while protecting metabolic rate. So that was their task. And I had a winning team, I had a losing team. So what we did, that's what we'll be doing in the spring, is basically a 2-week rapid fat loss study. And I just got back the IRB revisions today. So hopefully that's going to be approved so that we can start data collection February 1st. So 2 weeks of maintenance, a 2-week rapid fat loss design, and then 2 weeks of, did we do any damage to them, or do they recover from that within 2 weeks? And do they maintain fat loss? So that's what's next. Then where I'd love to get your guys' feedback is we're thinking of doing a weight loss study. And I need to appreciate this. This would be in females only. And again, these are not competitive physique athletes. These are females who are resistance trained and who are not overweight. So your typical gym goer female. What I want to do is, and I'm working on this with my Gianna Mastrofini. She's my master student that will be my research coordinator next year. We want to have maybe a 2 to 4 week period in one of our groups where we're going to slightly titrate or increase calories before we put them on a diet. So we're kind of priming them for a diet. And then we're going to have them diet. We don't know yet. Is it 2 weeks? Is it 4 weeks, 6 weeks? Those are the questions. And of course, three big things that I always have to be aware of: Thanksgiving vacation, Christmas vacation, and spring break. When we're doing these diet studies, I tend to just try to do everything we can to avoid doing the intervention over those periods. So I guess my question to you guys is, that population, is that going to be a wise approach? Are we going to learn anything by taking girls who aren't stage lean? They're, an average, let's say 20%, maybe 18% body fat. Do you think we can get any valuable information from that approach? So one group would increase, we don't know, 10% per week for 4 weeks. The other group would do 4 weeks of maintenance, and then they both diet. What are your thoughts?
I think this is a really interesting question because there is the quote unquote practice of building metabolic capacity, which I think is in question because we've definitely seen that slow titrated increase in calories don't often produce weight gain to the same degree as immediately jumping to it. And the observational conclusion to what might be happening is that this is slowly ramping up metabolic rate, with quotes around metabolic rate. Given what we know about what the most adaptable components of total daily energy expenditure are, I have a feeling that a lot of the times what we're seeing, especially since we're looking at people who are lean and active and are more likely to have a spendthrift metabolism or thrifty metabolism, is that it might be increases in NEAT. And if it is not actually a true increase in metabolic rate, how robust are those changes and do they hang around? And if you start dieting, will you just have to cut calories even lower relative to where you were, kind of getting to the same point as where you would if you'd just gone right into the diet? So basically, we're playing with the idea of your maintenance is a moving target. And to what degree does that target move due to NEAT or actual changes in metabolic rate? And then how resilient is NEAT to when you titrate or just make large reductions or increases in calories? And does it matter? Which I think is the real important piece. I mean, I would love to start a diet on the highest calories possible, but I do wonder if I walk my calories slowly up to 3,000, and normally I'd only be able to, be at 2,700 maintaining my weight, and then I drop down 500 or 600 from each one of those windows. How long will I get to diet on 2,500 versus 22 or 2,100 calories before I have to make a reduction anyway? So I do think that's valuable information, and it may be that a quote unquote metabolic building phase before you start a diet could be beneficial. But I also think it depends on where they're coming from. Like, it may be that the reason we observe that to be beneficial is because we see so many folks who come to us who are in a, I would say, they've been in a chronic state of low energy availability. And then bringing them out of that state of energy availability makes the diet more effective. If they're just kind of, walk around gym goers, as you say, maybe we won't see that effect. So I think
that's what I'm struggling with.
Yeah. So I think that, so the potential downside is that someone, you could run the study. There might be no significant difference, or they end up getting to the same place by different means. There's no applied benefit to either group compared to the other. And that's useful, because then at the very least, you could say, well, hey, this may be something that works when you're dealing with, a chronically dieted person. But for people just walking around, you don't have to, spend this 4-week period of trying to do metabolic building, effectively extending the phase where you have to be relatively, attentive to your nutrition and tracking calories. You can just get right into it, which I think would be valuable anyway, because there is a fair number of people who might think, oh, do I need to do this, metabolic building phase or this reverse dieting thing before I start dieting? Like, how does this work? And I think that the more we can simplify things and remove complexity and remove, anal retentive OCD behaviors, the better.
Okay.
Bill, quick question. Is there any way of guaranteeing the amount of calories they in fact eat, or no, you're just telling them the amount and they're trying to roughly eat that amount?
Yeah. So what we do is approximately a 2-week maintenance period where we say, don't change how you're eating. And we give them scales. So they'll go home with a scale so we can track that every day. And then if they didn't gain or lose weight, we assume that's their maintenance calories, and then we reduce from that. That's our lab's approach to identifying. And of course, there's issues with that, but to me, it's the most practical way that Molly Mom in Idaho can say, oh, I can track what I eat. So I don't like getting somebody's RMR and basing decisions on that with caloric, because not everybody has access to an RMR machine.
Yeah. What I was just going to comment on is essentially what Eric said. It reminded me when Danny Lennon recently, I was just talking to him about chrononutrition and talking about behavioral patterns of individuals, how he brought up the idea of front loading the calories versus back loading. And there's one particular study where individuals naturally would increase their NEAT. So they have a breakfast and then they would either walk more or whatever, maybe fidget, whatever the case may be. And so they ended up losing more weight overall, not because they were burning more calories via the food they're eating it earlier in the day, but simply because they're moving around more. So front loading someone naturally, and I mean, you guys would know better than myself. I thought there was something where sedentary individuals, if you're completely sedentary or not really active, there's not a high correlation between the amount of calories they eat and then what their BMR should be. But as you scale activity up, so if you make them start training, then slowly over time, as you increase their training, they'll tend to get a more rough ballpark estimate of how many calories they need to be eating to be at maintenance. So I think as you increase calories, if you're to increase calories beforehand, I wonder what overall adherence would be for those people. If we're talking about the average population that probably has a tendency, you say eat at maintenance, but Friday or Saturday, they're likely already going to be eating maybe a little bit more food. Then you telling them, you know what, we're going to feed you more than what you're used to and see what their compliance level is at. So I think it's interesting.
Yeah, and I'm thinking we probably should try to estimate or measure NEAT as best we can in a study design like that. And I've not done that before, so I'd have a learning curve.
Would it be like something shitty like a pedometer app, or like what would you do? I know that's like like what would you do?
That's what I mean. Yeah,
I think tracking steps would be worthwhile. You wouldn't be able to say, "Hey, that's neat." And when you wrote up your manuscript, you'd say, ad libitum is not the right word, but habitual step count changed or didn't change in response to feeding or underfeeding, which would be a surrogate measure for NEAT. But it might show something. I've definitely noticed, because we've done this with a lot of clients, where it's very common and easy now to track step counts just on your phone. And sure, there is a certain amount of reliability issues there, 10, 20%. But, if you see a consistent change day to day over time, that kind of can overwhelm that noise, especially when you're looking at individual versus a group. And we've definitely seen that when you increase or decrease calories, more so, I can say observational, when you decrease calories, if without trying to modify someone's step count, it does trend downwards. You find ways to move less on average, not everybody. So I think that it's basically free to do. Anyone can download a pedometer app on their phone. I mean, you would probably want it to be a little more controlled than that. You wouldn't want someone with some Samsung app and someone else with an iPhone app, and two different generations tracking with different. They're going to have whatever the accelerometer in their phone is, or GPS, and whatever the algorithm is going to be different person to person. So that might not be the best way to do it. But I would think that would be something. Shoot, you're not going to have. You figure out how many people are going to be in the study at the same time, and that's how many of these, pedometers or whatever device you use, accelerometers, to track steps, whatever's affordable and reliable, and then you just give that out to the next cohort to go through the study. That might be something that's within a reasonable budget.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thank you guys for your feedback. That's we just started discussing that study.
Awesome. You heard it here, folks. Yeah, that was we did it. We did it live. We're creating studies on Iron Culture Podcast live. What a treat! I love it.
Yeah, you're like Wilt Chamberlain, Eric, and I just threw the pass. You're just like slam.
Well, I'm going to say, let's say Stockton and Malone, because I don't actually know who passed Wilt Chamberlain. He had all of the all the kudos in his era.
Yeah.
So
I didn't really follow basketball myself, other than the Chicago Bulls era. But I'm just picturing a slam dunk, so I had to use that analogy.
Yes, Wilt Chamberlain can dunk.
Yeah, Bill. If you weren't aware, myself and Eric are big fans of LARPing. I don't know if you know what that is.
I don't know what a LARP is, or LARPing.
So we spoke about different sports. It just stands for live action role play. It's something that we do. It's how we get our need up. And so we didn't want to give a too esoteric kind of reference. So we thought we'd try and do basketball. We tried.
Okay.
Man, there's so many layers of untruth and problems in there. So you anyway, I'm not. It's not a rabbit hole we're going to go down, Omar. I will not be sucked in. So anyway, so that's very cool that you guys are going to be looking at that in the future. I'm really excited to see the research that comes out. Have you guys done any? You mentioned one of your old students, or your prior students, James Longstrom. Have you guys done any looking at post diet transition, like a reverse dieting, recovery diet, that kind of?
Yes. So James Longstrom was my master's student. He graduated. He now works for Lane Norton. Very good research mind, James. So he designed a study that initially, and we have not published this yet either. I have the same agreement with the journal. So we hope to submit that by January 15th as well. His research idea was to have physique athletes after their competition to follow one of two different weight gain approaches: a slower approach or a more rapid approach. So what was it? Reverse diet versus what's the other common term that's used in the field?
Like a recovery diet.
Yes,
it's kind of the term we coined. Yeah.
Yes. So what he attempted to do, and we got really good data. So let me start with that. We have really good data. We had 7 subjects. We presented that data at the ISSN conference last year. So I don't want to minimize the data, but what he had attempted to do, we were unable to execute on that. We had people self-select. Do you want to do a recovery diet where you're going to increase your calories after your show in a more rapid manner? Or do you want to do a reverse diet where you're going to be a little bit more slower and meticulous about your increase in calories? So we let them self-select, and then we said, okay, here's your general plan. Please stick to this plan and we made them pretty severely different so that we could say we have a reverse or recovery. What happened was the participants didn't follow that. So essentially it was this. There was no distinction between the two. So our intention was to answer that question. The question that we actually answered was, what happens after a physique competition? And we really can't justifiably say a recovery versus a reverse diet. And this was in 7 people. So it wasn't like we had 40 people. And by the way, I don't know if anybody on the planet will get 40 bodybuilders that just competed to do two different things. I think if it could be done, I would be able to do it at my university. And I mean, as you can appreciate, it's hard to standardize bodybuilders to do what you want them to do. So
100%.
Yeah, we got great data on post-show weight gain and nothing about recovery or reverse diet.
Well, that's important, though. I mean, I'm not saying this is what the data show, but if it was that, those who were trying to do a slow titration of calories had oopsies every few days, or they couldn't stick to that slow titration, that tells you something about, the feasibility of one approach or the other at the very least.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So we plan to publish that as a case series study. That's the intent with that data. So we're going to put all 7 subjects and discuss each of their individual cases. So we actually did get some hormones tested in that study, T3, right. T4, leptin. I think we did cortisol as well, metabolic rate, body composition, all that stuff. So very cool.
And I suppose you could even do some non-parametric stuff and just look at the kind of the rank, like regardless of quote unquote group, just kind of look at it in the perspective of who gained the most weight, who gained the least, who increased the calories the most, who increased the least, yes. And see if there were relationships there. That's kind of the Legion Athletic study. We have groups that are segregated by being at intended maintenance, an intended 5% surplus, and intended 15% surplus. But one of the things when we were talking about the study that we acknowledged is the difference between a 5 and a 15% surplus can sometimes be washed away by behavior. And like the weekends you were talking about, Omar, with just kind of natural human behavior. So that if we end up with people who are not gaining as much as intended or gaining less or more, we can simply stratify or look at the rank kind of based statistics of, was there a relationship between gaining more weight or gaining weight at a more rapid pace and different outcomes in terms of strength or body composition change. So really interesting to see that case series. That's very cool.
Yeah. And on that note, we have, and I'm very happy to say, Dr. Eric Trexler is he's agreed to be my data analyst. So he's
Bill, who?
Dr. Eric Trexler.
I don't mean to correct you, but as we found out, it actually is Derek Drexler.
It could be Aaron. It could be Aaron or Derek.
It's real tough.
We're just not sure. We don't think there's any other bodybuilding researchers who are, doctor with the same name as me. So we're just going off the assumption that I am the only Dr. Eric. Anything.
Eric. And ultimately, Eric, it's just unimportant because the individual's unimportant. So we don't want to get caught up in semantics, but we think it's Derek.
Hey, you know what? There's A-list celebrities, there's B-list, there's C-list, there's D-list, but they're all important. They all play a role in Hollywood. So we'll go with this Dr. Trexler for the purpose of this podcast, and we'll say that regardless of ranking importance, even if it is low, it is still important to some degree for some people. So anyway, carry on, Dr. Campbell. We didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Whoever he is, it's the guy that got his PhD at University of North Carolina, works with Greg Nuckols, and he's just a phenom with data. Takes it to a level that is I'm just humbled at my knowledge. So he has helped us with James's study on the associations, and is whatever his name is will be helping us with the analysis of our data and future studies.
Awesome.
No, that's great. And so I'm going to take a second and be actually 100% serious. So Dr. Trexler, he is awesome, and it's really cool. He's a part of monthly applications in strength sport now. And one thing that the rest of us
never heard of
it. Yeah, it's pretty good. At least I would say 3 out of the 4 people involved in it are really, really good.
Okay.
And then we also brought Eric Trexler on. So, but Derek, Aaron, I don't know, who knows, Dr. Trexler.
Yeah.
But the one thing that's always that's really cool now is when he does reviews of meta-analyses or controlled trials, he'll often pick up something in the stats that we didn't even think of, or even if I had thought of it, I wouldn't know how to analyze it in the way he does. So our kind of internal peer review process has been, greatly benefited by him coming to the team. So he is absolutely fantastic with data. So that's really cool. I'm glad you guys are collaborating. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it really opens up what I'm able to do with our studies. Because again, like you just said, he'll see things in the data that I would never identify.
100%. Okay. End of serious time, and that is all the positive things we'll be saying about he whose name should not be spoken.
Yeah.
On the podcast. So,
multiplicity. Yeah, you said it most accurately, Eric. I think when you gave the analogy of multiplicity, and there's copies of the original, and you only need to take a look to see who's the original, the progenitor.
The OG.
Yeah. Now, Dr. Campbell, here's a question for you. When you said you got your PhD in 2007, before there was this thing called Instagrams, or before when YouTube was still just about sharing cat videos. Let me ask you this: as a researcher over now the last decade, what are some of the biggest revelations you've had when it comes to training and nutrition? Things that have caused you to reevaluate the way that you look at everything.
So the flexible dieting, before I was introduced to that, I was shocked. I'm like, no, I think the types of foods, and again, I'm not talking about a health perspective. I mean, just from a physique perspective, and I'm not saying you shouldn't try to eat healthy foods, but the fact that you could substitute white rice for brown rice and not gain 38 pounds next week, I was like, wow, this is interesting. So that's definitely changed the way I look at food, that whole phenomenon. And again, I love how practical that is. I think a lot of normal people can embrace that type of nutritional behavior. And a lot of people can't because of the tracking. So there was that. That's a big question. So what else? Oh, the other thing that I would scoff at was you're going to increase somebody's calories, even if you're doing it slowly and they're not going to gain weight. That's impossible. Yeah. You do that in your coaching world, but that's not how it really is. And Lane Norton was the first one to tell me that. I'm like, hey, Lane, I like you, but you're off your rocker on that one. And then I have some clients, or I had clients at one time, and my wife was the one where she got pretty lean, and we slowly increased her calories, and she wasn't gaining weight, and we kept increasing calories. And I'm like, wow. So I'd say those two things have changed my view on things, which is, by the way, my whole research line is, like, again, learning from people in the trenches and then just putting it in my lab to validate or critique.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool, just to see how perspectives change and how truly good science comes from an open-minded, curious perspective rather than a authoritative perspective. So I think that's a fantastic attitude to have. Piggybacking on what Omar said, bringing up Instagram and YouTube and social media, in an applied field like fitness, even as a scientist, to me, one thing I've noticed that the winds have really shifted in the last decade, in that if you want to have an impact with your research, which most people in fitness and exercise science do, that's why we get into the field, you're almost obligated to find some way to also not just conduct the research, but find a way to disseminate it and then get those messages out there. And one thing I think that you've done a really good job with is doing that over platforms that are non-traditional. Like, most researchers are like, yeah, I'm on Twitter, that counts, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's mostly just researchers yelling at each other. That doesn't really get the information out there. And so, for example, Dr. Campbell, you've got an Instagram account where you do a lot of like quizzes and questions and like, hey, informing people through kind of that Socratic method through Instagram, which I think is really revolutionary. And it's something that most people would scoff at Instagram as a platform for disseminating scientific information. Obviously, I'm not one of those people. I try to do the same thing, but I really like the style that you've done it. How long were you aware that, hey, this is something I should be doing, this is something I should be paying attention to, and what was that learning curve like for you?
Well, I really appreciate that question. That has weighed on me for years. So, again, I think we have to look at my university, a research intensive university. I used to say, if I had 1 billion followers across all channels, name one, nobody cares in my university. The other professors don't care, peer reviewers don't care. It makes no difference. Now, I think that's going to change. So for the first probably 10 years of my career, maybe 11, I could not justify posting on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter because it's not getting me like I looked at it like this. Every post I would make on Facebook, which I think I did make one post on Facebook. I have a Facebook account, and I think I made one post on it, maybe two.
Nice.
But I haven't been on Facebook for probably 3 years. Yeah, so I did what I thought was best for my family and my career and just said, I have to focus on tenure, getting publications, getting grants, mentoring students. And I looked at that social media as a distraction from everything that I thought I needed to do. I think I was right professionally with the career path that I've chosen. Now that I have been promoted to full professor, I've now embraced the idea of social media. And I always knew, hey, I should do this. What I've learned, of course, my students were always making fun of me, like, you should do this. And I'm like, well, what should I do? And they're like, TikTok. And I'm like, well, I don't know what that is. I knew what Facebook was. So I've embraced it over the last, year. And it's done nothing but provide me more opportunities. Like, I don't know if I would be on your podcast if my Instagram account, if I didn't invest time and effort into that. I'm attracting better students, I think, because of that. So I like it. I don't like Facebook, and I'm not on Twitter. I have the impression that Twitter is a very liberal, and it's very, like, I don't know. Here's my impression, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong. If I posted my information on Twitter, people would have 28 different negative comments about my study design. And I'm thinking, well, I already get that from reviewers. I don't need that on Twitter. Instagram, at least in my impression, it's like 100% positive. Like I'm not getting hardly, I think I counted 2 times where I've gotten a negative feedback on Instagram. So to me, it's been very positive. Like, people are appreciative. I've been told that Facebook is negative, and I think that Twitter is, like you said, a bunch of nerdy scientists trying to act like they're the smartest person in the world. So my research is supposed to help normal people. And I think Instagram's the best platform for me to do that. But I love the fact that you even bring it up, because it's a change. When I wake up, I didn't have to worry about it. Now I'm like, oh, well, I'm reading this study. I could ask a question about this. So I don't do it lightly, and I think I'm embracing it.
I think it's really important, and I think it's something that more and more researchers are going to do. And it's funny. I actually gave a little small group seminar at AUT that involved PhD students as well as some of our full professors. And it was really common for people to have Twitter accounts. And it is like kind of like you described. It's very free for all. There are positives and negatives to that. Like you said, if a bunch of people are arguing about research, best case scenario there is that you will get new ideas. You'll see flaws, etc. Now, I think that is done a little bit better. And not that we shouldn't do that. And I like the idea of open peer review and these types of things. But when it's done in a structured environment and you're not being like called out publicly and feel like you're being attacked, you're much more likely to be open versus feeling defensive. And it's also when everyone's seeing you criticize someone else, it's the opportunity for the criticizer to try to be the smartest person in the room and not to come to it as, hey, I'd like to give you peer review, but rather, hey, I'd like to come show you, Mr. Dr. Fancy Pants, that I am the actual Dr. Fancy Pants who knows what's talking about. So it can definitely, at its worst, devolve into that, but that's not to say there aren't positive qualities. And I do think it's a bit of my main issue, and what I pointed out in that seminar to people was that Twitter is a lot of academics talking to other academics. It's not a great platform. I mean, and if that's what you want to do, and if that's what you need to do, especially like if you're in a field like stats, or if you're a methods guy or gal, like that's fantastic. You need to get out, better ways of conducting your research to researchers. But like you said, if you're trying to reach people with a aesthetic based research, Instagram is the perfect platform. And of course, people are going to be much more positive because they want to take what you've learned and implement it and figure out things and learn new ways to modify their own life or their client's life directly. So I think it's probably the perfect marriage. I think Facebook can be a lot of things. It really is very dependent on who's talking to who and where, but it is very, very like in-depth conversational based kind of stuff, which, depending on what's being talked about, if it's politics, religion, or anything else like that, it goes bad very quick. And it doesn't really have an algorithm that rewards information dissemination. It rewards certain conversations. And I think really the benefit of Facebook is like the groups you can create. It's a useful tool for practitioners to have people who have opted in to see something. But if you share like a link on your page, you're going to get almost no penetration compared to, making a post on the gram. So oddly enough, at least right now, and of course the algorithms change, the nature of the platforms change all the time, I actually think for our field, Instagram probably is one of the better platforms for putting out regular content. Of course, I think YouTube is a better place for more in-depth, longer videos and stuff like that. And podcasts are great for long form. So it's the nature of it's changing. But I think it's really, really cool just to see, like you said, a tenured full professor at a R1 university who's engaging with Instagram to disseminate information. That's unfortunately rare. And man, there's some statistic that the average peer-reviewed paper is read by 5 people, I think, like something like that. And that's almost independent of impact factor. There are some amazing reviews that have been written on applied topics that are published in sports medicine. It's not open access. It's one of the highest impact factor journals in our field, but no one's read it. And I think that does start to negatively impact it now that we're, the world is becoming more interconnected. And I'm starting to see, and this is a guess, I don't have peer-reviewed data to support this, but JSCR, the Journal of Strength Conditioning Research, and the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition, I'm seeing their impact factors rise a lot, but I don't think it's necessarily because anything the journal is doing differently. No offense, JSCR and JISSN. I think it has to do with the type of research that's getting published in there. It's the type of research that gets shared on social media, and then people find, access it, and it gets into the minds of young researchers, young master's students, and other people who then come up in academia, and that's what they're citing because of the social media exposure. And I think we're seeing this interesting, it's no longer 2 separate things you do. Like you had to choose, like, look, is Facebook a distraction from me getting published and getting tenure? Now you could almost view it as, hey, me getting on a podcast or posting this or doing a study review on social media might actually be helping my research profile get up in an indirect way.
Yeah. I will say, I don't think that JISSN, or JISN as it's known, is going to take any offense, Eric, to anything that you said. And I've noticed with Eric, actually, how he's been more active on Instagram. We all, in ways, bringing up that kind of supplements funding research or social media, some of the precarious parts about it. We all kind of do dances with the devil, where we're trying to determine the best way to disseminate either information, what platform to talk on, which one where you could, get your tribe. And if I can make a really shitty analogy, what I could say, I think we have the opportunity to try and attract like-minded individuals, or slowly, because we are a cult, proselytize and get new followers via kind of being serious here, Bill. Like, you post on Instagram, someone becomes intrigued. Wait a second, that sounds really cool. Let me see how he conducts his research. Oh, that's what it's like? Well, maybe I want to consider, in this field, I want to further myself, further my education. Now I want to make that choice. And so sometimes that low-hanging fruit that eventually could be something much more rewarding, I think is understated. And I'm not trying to blow smoke up my own butt or anything. There's a guy who now I've been creating content for a decade, Nicholas Verhoeven, if he's listening. I know he's gone through and actually gotten now his PhD in exercise physiology. And he said, and he just wrote me a message, and I'm not taking credit for that. I'm just saying that the opportunity for some of the mass communication to kind of hook individuals, and then they get much further down the rabbit hole and they kind of percolate up, is very important. And the shitty analogy I was going to use,
you just add it to your other one.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm just building on top of them. Is that
it's a construction of poo.
Yeah,
you're doing great.
It's a fecal dynasty. So you have Campbell soup. So we have a fecal dynasty over here. Yeah. And so I would say that it's questionable Netflix if it's more convenient than something, let's say, like Blockbuster, in terms of the algorithm, what it selects to you. Sure, fine, whatever. We can make some arguments. It's questionable. That's kind of like the internet overall, I'd say, versus trying to do some research or find some information via a library or what have you. But the Criterion channel is a film channel that's dedicated towards cultivating certain films that they would actually think has artistic merit, and so they carefully cultivate the films that they think are important, and so it's selected. It's called the Criterion channel for a reason. So they have directors, and as a result of that, those that are really interested in learning about film, so editing, cinematography, all the various components, when they want to learn, they go to that. So they have developed a tribe that is far more interested. And so by you being on Instagram, by Eric being on Instagram, being these science communicators, they're able to pull together these individuals that may have been interested and might not have known where they want to go, and now they're ready to take the next step. And so it's a force multiplying effect down the road. The amount of students that you potentially get, the quality of the students, then maybe eventually, a second order effect, then the funding that you get via, someone seeing this, it comes back to you and so forth. So I see how it could be precarious, some of the things on social media, but from being in it now for a decade, I see some of the utility, and it's the utility and ultimately the good stuff that keeps me in it, and I think keeps you guys now involved on social media, on whatever platforms you use.
Yeah, and I tell my students, I don't know how today's fitness professional, I don't know if they can be successful without that skill set. So I need to be somewhat relevant just to have conversations with my students. So that's another driving force, I suppose, that pushed me in a direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's an important thing to consider, is that social media is becoming more and more ingrained in our society, for better or worse. And it's ironic that even issues with social media, if you want to deliver that message and point that out to people, you have to use social media to do so.
Yeah, 100%.
Like Omar, you just recently, mentioned that since you have, he's done a cut. He's gotten good. He did a photo shoot and posted a lot of pictures related to his content of him just looking really muscular and lean. And that has been there's a problem there, that the truthfulness or the legitimacy of information is enhanced if you look better. And that's something that we should point out to people so they can check their own biases, because there's plenty of really, really good bodybuilders who maybe are giving really bad information. Likewise, there's people who have, maybe don't even show their physiques, who are PhD researchers with an entire lab dedicated to this, who have really good information to share. And because, and one obviously should be higher than the other, but it's the opposite based on the way social media is used. But if you want to point that out, what do? You make an Instagram post. Yeah. And I think that's just such an interesting inversion. And you don't get to be a part of that conversation, regardless of your feelings about the medium, unless you participate or at least know how to use the medium in some way. And I think I didn't get on Instagram until 2016, and that was a pretty late adopter thing for me, considering the field I'm in, and for all the same reasons. But I had a very kind of snooty, poo-poo, focus on the negatives and not look at the positives view of it. And it was largely to my own detriment. And I feel like I'm making a much larger impact now because I've taken the plunge.
Is that your primary social media outlet, Instagram? It
is. And I think one thing I've done is I've become very intentional. I don't use social media for pleasure. And I think a lot of people who even intend to use it for pleasure, they experience a lot of unintended negatives. But I'm very aware of different types of media platforms being more suitable to different types of content. So long form content, the podcast, this is great. We can have an in-depth discussion with a researcher like yourself about all this stuff. Also, I think people think blog posts are dead, but they're not. They have stayed very constant. The amount of people who are interested in blogs, who want to read blogs and want to read things, they're still there. It's just that now there's also this whole medium of the way of being on the internet, where you only watch videos or you listen to audio files, and that's attracted more people. But it's not like blogs have died, just the proportion compared to everything else. So I still write blog posts semi-regularly for the 3D Muscle Journey website, and then I post shorter form content on a daily basis on Instagram. And then I'm occasionally on YouTube, whether it's this guy's channel or the 3D Muscle Journey. So I have different ways of disseminating different mediums of communication, depending on what I think is the most appropriate way to deliver a message. And of course, I still publish peer-reviewed research, and I almost always try to get it open access for the same reasons you stated. So I think there's a lot of different ways to get information out, and then people will self-select based on, like you said, Omar, how low-hanging is that fruit for them. If there's someone who's never been exposed to academic research before, or even the concept of empiricism, but they are interested in using a truthful, effective approach to physique change, they're probably not going to engage with my ResearchGate profile. They're probably going to see me on Instagram, and then they're going to ask me a question. And I'm like, "Oh, there's this whole world of research." And I'm like, "Yeah, check out Dr. Bill Campbell's stuff." And then they follow you, and the next thing you know, a year later, they're actually reading the methods section of an open access journal article. So I think it may not be easy to see it, but the dots do connect in sometimes very important ways, because in our field, individuals can make such a large impact. Omar, just like you, I don't want to take credit for anything, but I can't tell you how many messages I've got from people who've said, "Hey, my academic career was at least to some degree influenced by what you've done." And that's the best feeling in the world when you have that, because it lets you know all these things you're putting out into the ether over these various media channels are actually having some positive impact. So, yeah.
We gave you the keys, Dr. Campbell. We just gave you the social media keys. We expect you in a Ferrari somewhere in Dubai, probably with a new company that's likely CBD inspired. I'm going to be honest with you. Maybe an individual called Dan Blazarian will have a rifle and a yacht near you. I don't know, but we've given you the keys to social media success, and we look forward to seeing your ascendancy.
I just have to execute, I guess, now.
Absolutely. I want to be buying your CBD oil from Dubai with Bitcoin in a few months. That's where I see your future, and somehow your university is supporting that, because that's what we've learned. Yeah,
that might be a challenge.
Best response ever.
Especially the rifle part of that.
Yes, they might. Yeah, that's the one piece of funding we couldn't get. It was the rifles in the deserts of Dubai. So, bringing it full circle back to something that may or may not be important, depending on if you feel we've covered it all. I think we're at the point in the podcast where, Dr. Campbell, we want to give you the floor open to cover anything that you feel we may have not explored adequately. If there's more information about the lab that you want to bring up, or its history, its future projects, or there's publications that you guys have put out or haven't put out yet that you feel is cool stuff you want to share with the audience, this is your opportunity just to go over any of that.
Yeah, so I guess I have a lot of, like I said, I think right now my research team's at 26 students, all volunteer. Oh. So I can't name them all, but I'll just mention 3 people most recently right in front of my nose that have really improved the way I do things. And I think one, if not 2 or maybe 2 or 3 of them. Lauren Colenso Semple graduated from my master's program this past year. She had a major influence on, I had these ideas that I articulated. She was great at saying, this is how you should execute X, Y, and Z. So she had I don't know how to say it other than just an incredible impact on my lab operations, the direction that I'm doing. So if you know her, she is just supremely talented. Now I have my master student that I'm about to lose, because she's going to be graduating soon, Madeline Seidler. In fact, she's on a tour right now visiting some doctoral programs. She essentially took what Lauren helped institute and then took that to another level. So she manages all 27 of my research staff, does it with just an incredible attitude, is smart. So she's continuing the success. And then I'm looking forward to next year. Gianna Mastrofini will be my research coordinator next year. And I can't give her enough work. She's like, what can I do? All right, well, read these 27 articles. All right. And then 3 hours later, all right, what can I do now? So my future is just so bright, just because of the quality of students that are deciding to come here. So I think that's the last. Other than I'd like to mention my Instagram account. And if you guys are as good as you say you are, maybe you can put that in text on the screen too.
Hey, we may be able to, but just at the very least, will you say what your Instagram account is, just to make sure, in case we can't get it on the screen? Let us know everywhere where people can find you auditorily,
and we'll link it in the description of the show notes and on the YouTube description as well.
Oh, yeah, it is at Bill Campbell PhD, and Instagram is my only outlet.
Love it. Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. That's so cool that you have such capable students who are both going on to carry out kind of the work they started with you in other places. I know Lauren Clenzo Semple, she's working with Stronger by Science now, and doing great work there. And I was very impressed. I had the opportunity to Skype with her, and I just think anywhere she goes, she's going to be kicking ass. That's great. And it sounds like the lab has a bright future. So just make sure everyone, you follow Dr. Bill Campbell on Instagram, and you just keep an eye out, because there's going to be a lot of relevant research coming out of his lab, and just a lot of good dissemination of some of the very basic information, but very important information about nutrition and exercise as it relates to physique enhancement that you can find on a very regular basis on his social media. So yeah, we just want to thank you for coming on and for the great discussion. And I'm going to kick it over to Omar, the closeout king, as we end this episode of Iron Culture.
Yeah, Bill, I also just want to reiterate and thank you for being on, and I hope that you are able to have some form of reconciliation with your family and with the Campbell Soup dynasty. I think that is truly where your funding would, that's where the future is, that in Dubai. So we thank you. We're going to link in the show notes your Instagram so you can become that Instagram mogul. I want to thank every single individual for listening to another episode of Iron Culture, the #1 cult on the podcast, History, Science, Culture. If you enjoyed it, you can leave a rating and review on iTunes, on YouTube. Go ahead, give it a like. If you didn't enjoy it, we're fine. Give it a dislike. Leave a comment. We'll do our best to respond. We're back every single Monday. See you in the next one.